All right, welcome to Hands-on Equations. I'm going to be showing you some details about what this would look like if we were doing this in class. Obviously, we're not doing this in class, so we'll have to make do with this kind of an environment, unfortunately. What I want to show you is exactly what hands-on equations look like. So first of all, hands-on equations look like having these pawns and number cubes. And the number cubes have different numbers on different sides of them. And I hope that it all flips around and looks right from your angle as I'm putting them up there. Basically, the idea is that this scale that I'm showing you right here, which I'll put right here, has one side of an equation on one side of the scale and the other side here. And it's automatically balanced because our idea is that we're going to keep it balanced for all time's sake. So what I'm going to do is there's 7 lessons that you have in your packet. And I'm going to talk about them one at a time, and I'll tell you to pause in between. You should pause, you should work the worksheet that goes with it in your packet, and then you should resume the video session. That's what that's going to look like. So let me just kind of show you what happens first. So when you have a pawn on one side and you have a number cube on the other side, what this is equivalently telling you is that the pawn's value is equal to 5. So when we're looking at this, we're going to be trying to work through guess and check through lesson 1 about what in the world does the pawn have to equal to make this work. So for example, if you had 2 on this side and you have an 8 on this side, with guess and check, we would say, oh, look, the pawn has to be worth 4 because 4 and 4 added together, okay, the 2 pawns next to each other, addition, equal 8. So through trial and error. Now on your worksheet, what you're going to see is there's going to be a name for the pawn. The pawn's name is, no shocker, X. So when we're looking at this and we're finding out that this pawn is equal to 4, then over on the guess or the check step, what you would actually be doing is you would be writing down 4 plus 4 equals 8. And you would be putting a little check mark that says, yep, I agree, that's correct. So for example, on the first one, there's a pawn, 2 pawns, right? And it says pawn, pawn, 10. So on the problem number 1 on your first worksheet, you would actually look at this and say, hey, look, my pawn has to equal 5. And then over on the check step, so you'd write x equal 5. And then on the check step, you would write 5 plus 5 equals 10, and you'd put a check mark, and then you'd go on to the next problem. So go ahead and take a look at those 10 problems on that worksheet. I've done the first one with you already. Fill those in, and then come back when you're done. Okay, so hopefully you have completed the first of the worksheets, and we're going to move on to the second one. So lesson number 2, what we're going to be doing as we move through these lessons is sort of adding on additional features that help us for solving equations. So yes, I realize that eventually kids don't use pawns to solve equations, and that's fine. But the whole point of what we're doing with having the pawns is for us to give a perspective to students of a concrete image of what algebra looks like. Right? So this does not extend itself to everything. We're not going to work with fractions. We're not going to work with decimals. There's a lot of things we're not going to work with, but there's a lot we are to give kids a perspective of a concrete image to associate with algebra as they're getting started. All right, so in lesson number 2, what we're going to have is we're going to have equations that actually start out looking like equations. Okay, so the first equation that I'm going to work with, if you want to jot this down, so this is not on your worksheets, but this is just a separate one, is 2x plus x equals x plus 8. So here's 2x plus x equals x plus 8. So this is my first equation, okay? And what we're actually taking a look at is, again, what happens when we try this by trial and error. So maybe you try and you say, okay, let's see if the number 2 works. 2 plus 2 plus 2, that's 6. That's not 2 plus 8, that's 10. So 2 is not the right answer. So you go in and you check another value and you say, okay, how about maybe it's 3? And you do 3 plus 3 plus 3, that's 9. Well, 3 plus 8 is not 9 either, so that doesn't work. So we're going to try something different. And maybe we get to 4. And you do 4 plus 4 plus 4, that's 12. And then 4 plus 8 is 12. So it is actually going to be the value of 4. So x would equal 4. And on your check step on the paper, if you were doing a check step, you would write 4 plus 4 plus 4. Equals 4 plus 8, and you check mark it that that is a true statement. So then you're going to be doing lesson number 2, right? The second one, their first equation actually starts out as 2x equals x plus 3. Okay, so you're going to think about this from a trial and error perspective, and I realize you don't have my hands-on equations. I wish I could, get them to you because I have classroom set of them, of course. So we're going to have to kind of make do with what we have, but this is the imagery that we would be using. So go ahead and push pause and then come back for lesson 3. All right, so I hope that you've done your second lesson and you're coming back now for lesson 3. So in lesson 3, we're going to start out with the equation 4x plus 2 equals 3x plus 9. So jot that down, 4x plus 2 equals 3x plus 9. So if we're setting that up, 4x would look like this, plus 2 would look like this, and yeah, some of my number cubes are red. And then I have it equal to 3x plus 9. And here's my 9. So this is my equation that I have so far, all right, set up with the hands-on tools. So in lesson number 3, what we learn is that guess and check is fine, but the more complicated the equation, the harder guess and check becomes, because I have more places I'm plugging values into. And yes, I could do guess and check, but it might end up taking me considerably longer because I've got more going on. So we're going to learn the first of our 2 legal moves. Our first legal move is to be able to remove a pawn from both sides simultaneously, right? So if I take a pawn, I can take a pawn off both sides, and I can do it here again, and then I can do it again. And once I have pawns left on only one side, guess and check becomes much, much easier, right? So now this is pawn plus 2, or x plus 2 equals 9. Well, that means that the pawn is equal to 7, right? 7 plus 2 is 9. So we believe that the answer is 7. So if I were to go back to the original problem and check and see if it works, that's what I would do on my check step on my paper, is I would say, okay, I did the legal moves, I removed the pawns, and I ended up with x equals 7. So after I end up with the x equals 7, can I go back to the original equation and it works? So 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 2, that's 30. 7 plus 7 plus 9, 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 9 is 30. So on your paper, that's what you would write down. 7 all these times plus my 2 equals 7 all these times plus my 9. Checks out that at 30 equals 30, you need to put a check mark. So that's the legal move that you're allowed to do for lesson number 3. I can remove pawns from both sides. So pause this and complete your lesson number 3 worksheet. All right, welcome back. We're ready for lesson number 4. I hope you've completed lessons 1, 2, and 3 worksheets. You should have by now. On lesson number 4, what we're going to do is we have a known legal move that we've already talked about, right? We're able to remove a pawn from both sides. Well, we have a second legal move that we're going to be working with in this section. So let me start out again with an equation for you. The equation we're going to start out with is 2x plus 4 is equal to 10. Okay, so this one wouldn't be terrible to use guess and check. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't have the legal move necessary to remove a pawn from both sides because there's not a pawn on both sides. But the legal move that I want to show you on this step is the ability to remove a number cube from both sides. So this is the value of 4, and this one's the value of 10. 10 actually has the ability to be changed into 6 plus 4. So I'm going to do that and actually show you that step right here, if I can find a 6. So this is 6 plus 4. And once I have the actual number cubes matching on both sides, I can remove the number cube. Now I have pawns on one side because I've either removed or didn't have pawns on both sides to begin with. And I have number cubes on one side. And again, the guess and check becomes easier. So clearly the number value that I get now for these pawns is going to be the number 3. So 3 plus 3 is equal to 6. And I would go back to the original equation to make sure that it works, of course. My original equation started out like this. So my check step would say 3 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. And yes, that does check. So we'd check mark that and we would continue on down the page. Okay, so that's my legal move that I've got new in lesson number 4. So go ahead and pause, complete your lesson number 4 worksheet, and come back and join me for lesson number 5. All right, thank you for joining me back on lesson number 5. What you'll notice as you're taking a look at your worksheet on lesson number 5 is that there's some subtraction involved. We didn't have subtraction on the previous worksheets. So let me give you a separate one, not the ones that are on your worksheet for us to do together. So jot this down. It's 5x minus 3x plus 2 equals x plus 5. I'll say it again. 5x minus 3x plus 2 equals x plus 5. So the way that this works is we just move from left to right. So it starts out saying 5x. So this is 5x. So I'm moving from left to right, putting my system together. Whoops, let me get it where you guys can all see it. There's 5x. And then it says minus 3x. So what I physically do is after I put the 5 there, I remove 3 of them. And then it says plus 2. So I'm going to continue going. Here's plus 2 equals x plus 5. Oops, 5. There we go. So after we've removed in the process of inserting them to begin with, right, we're going to do the same legal moves we have before until we get to a point where we feel like it's easy enough to solve without having to do the legal moves. So here's my first legal move. Of course, I got a pawn on both sides so I can remove it. And while yes, I could remove the 2 block from both sides, I don't know that it's really all that necessary at this point. You should be able to look at this and say, I know what the pawn equals. The pawn equals 3, right? Yeah, so 3 plus 2 is equal to 5. But again, we would go back to the original equation and we would look at that. So in terms of doing your check step on paper, you would do 5 times 3 and then minus 3 times 3 plus the 2 equals 3 plus 5. And you would check to make sure that both sides were equal to one another. So that's the new information, is what we do when the process actually has a subtraction of a pawn in the middle of the problem as we're working. Okay, so go ahead and pause, complete lesson number 5, and then come back and join me for lesson number 6. All right, so in lesson number 6, hopefully as you're looking at your problems on your worksheet for lesson 6, you see some parentheses. So what do we do with parentheses? Well, as you're aware, of course, you know the distributive property. We've talked about it since chapter 3 in our specific class, and we know that we can distribute, the values across the parentheses. Well, what we can want to remember here in this is that we can also just double or triple whatever we have. So go ahead and write this equation down for me. This is our sample example that I'm going to do with you. Let's see, it looks like 2, and then in parentheses we have x plus 3 equals x plus 8. So 2 parenthesis x plus 3 equals x plus 8. So what it means to have 2 parenthesis x plus 3 is that I have x plus 3 twice. So there's x plus 3 and another x plus 3. Okay, so this is what it would look like to draw x plus 3 twice. And then I have x plus 8 on the other side. So there's my 8 and here's my x. So x plus 8 on the other side. Once we have it all set up, we can actually do the same legal moves that we were doing before, where we remove pawns and we remove number cubes from both sides. So I can remove this pawn from both sides. You might want to combine the 3's that are here, right, and make them, say, a 6, if you want to do it that way. Or you could change your number cubes and remove number cubes from both sides. That would be fine as well. Any way which you think about it, you're going to end up getting that this is the number 2, right? 2 plus 6 is equal to 8. So if you go back to your original equation as it was given, you would put in the 2 for the x. So you have a 2, parenthesis, 2 plus 3, in parenthesis, equals 2 plus 8. And you would check to make sure that both sides do in fact equal 10 in this, or I'm sorry, 11 in this case, that they both check out to equal the same value. In this case, it's 11. So that's what you're going to do. It's not that it's incorrect, for example, to write down that 2, to do 2x plus 6, but it's definitely a little mysterious for kids who are maybe not as comfortable with the distributive property as you are. So it makes more sense for them, when you start out, to be writing x plus 3 and x plus 3. Right? Because this is 2 times x plus 3, because the x plus 3 is written twice. So that's what it would look like for example number, or my sample example. Go ahead and pause now, complete lesson number 6, and then come back and join me for lesson number 8. Number 7. Last one for us. Okay, so on lesson number 7, what we're actually doing is we're taking the equation and we're actually drawing the setup that you've been seeing in my number cubes. So as you're drawing this, let me actually show you how this would look. Go ahead and write down the equation 4x plus 3 equals 3x plus 9. Okay, 4x plus 3 equals 3x plus 9. And this is what it would draw out to look like if you do that. So our pawns can be represented simply by triangles, just as you've seen on the previous pages of worksheet that you've done. The 3 would be a number cube written with a box around it. On the other side, you'll see 3 x's and a number cube for 9. And then you'll see sort of the balanced scale look drawn between them, right? A horizontal line and then a tiny vertical line separating them. What you'll notice after that is how you show the removal of items. So you'll remove the pawns one at a time with arrows. So if you have an arrow removing a pawn from the left, you have an arrow removing a pawn from the right. So you're going to do that piece by piece. And then the number cubes, of course, also can be removed. But when you remove a number cube, that's equivalent to subtraction. So be very careful. Sometimes students will inadvertently use division, right, instead of subtraction. So we mark out the number cube 3 from the left. We would mark out 3 of the 9 from the right. So if we do that, what I'm ending up left with, it doesn't show the resulting of that. I'm so sorry about that. But it should be 1 pawn, 1 triangle on the left, and 1 number cube 6 on the right. So x would be equal to 6, and then you would go back again and you would do your second check step right here. They're showing the check step right here. Okay, so you have your 4 pawns and your 3 pawns and your 9, and if you put in a 6 for each one of those number cubes, for each one of those pawns, and simplify with the number cubes, you get 27 on both sides, and that would be your check step. 27 is equal to 27. So that's the end of hands-on equations. If you have any questions, as always, please send me an email and we will work through those together, or check in with me on Zoom when we have the Zoom for the day that this is due.